And now, everyone, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to our guest, DJ Swivel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. How's everyone feeling today? Good? Last day of Hall of Fame. We're almost wrapped up. So it's been an exciting week. I know I've seen a lot of you at some of the events this week, so thanks for coming out. This is always my favorite event of the year because I get to bring a song. And I remember when I was at Full Sail in the recording arts program, I would have loved to see, how somebody mixed a whatever Dr. Dre record or a, Fabulous record or what have you. So this is always my favorite event because I get to bring a song that I've worked on and show you guys sort of, break it down, show you everything that sort of went into it and the thought process behind the production and the mixing and all of that. And it's always a great time for Q&A and I get to answer all your questions. And I never know what they are, and I never know what's interesting about this. So I really encourage you guys, if you have questions, jump up and ask. Also, I like to keep these things a little informal. So as I'm breaking down the mix, if you have a question about something I'm working on, throw your hands up and somebody will find you, and we don't have to wait for Q&A. So I would imagine most of you guys probably have an idea of who I am. Usually I sort of start these off by sharing a bit of my story from when I graduated Full Sail and how I sort of got to where I am today. I'll try to run through that quickly. I'm sure this is redundant for a lot of you, but I graduated RA in 2005. I moved straight to New York. I'm originally from Toronto, so I was an international student here at Full Sail. I moved straight to New York once I graduated, and I knew I wanted to work in hip-hop music, and I felt like New York was the city best suited to do that. So I moved up. I got an internship at a studio on the Lower East Side in New York that was a beautiful studio, but I really did not like the internship. I thought it was everything I wanted, but they weren't really working on any of the music that I wanted, and so I spent about a month or two there, and then I quit. This was a bit of a challenge because being a Canadian, I had, I think after Full Sail, 1 year to find a job and become a productive member of society before they were going to send me home. So that was a bit of a risk, and I was working with career development here at Full Sail, and there was an opportunity that came across their desk to apply for a job with a guy named Duro. Some of you may know who Duro is if you listen to hip-hop and know some of the culture there, but Duro owns Desert Storm Records with his partner DJ Clue, discovered Fabulous, very well-known mix engineer, mixes for Jay-Z and you name it, Nas, any hip-hop that went through New York, and a lot more than that he did. All the Pharrell records back in the day, a ton of stuff. So, and also an amazing producer himself, produced for a lot of big artists. So I applied for this job, and I got an email back a few weeks later from his assistant saying, hey, we loved your resume, but you said you were a DJ, and we've had DJs leak music before, and unfortunately we can't hire you, so this is a courtesy email to remove that from your resume if you're going to continue to apply at studios in New York. So I felt a little defeated. But I did not let that deter me, and I just begged for a job interview. I emailed back and I said, listen, I would never in a million years leak any music. I just wanted to show you that I have worked in music and I understand music, and I just really want this opportunity. I said, just give me a shot, meet me. If you don't like me, I'll go home. So they said, well, we've already filled the position, unfortunately, but if you'd like a tour of the studio, we can do that. So I ended up going up there, and I got a tour of the studio and got to meet Duro and talk to his assistant a bit. And I left thinking well, that was a nice meeting, but no expectations. And about 2 weeks later, I got a call saying, all right, you start on Monday. So, and I ended up starting the beginning of January in 2006. And I remember the first day I walked in the studio and Duro was working on the We Belong Together remix for Mariah Carey. And I was cleaning the toilets. They were recording Fabulous and Styles P on this remix. So my first day in this new studio, I got to not even meet. I got to see Fabulous and Styles P in the studio, two artists who I'm a huge fan of. So I knew that one day, this was gonna, as soon as I was there, this was the place where I was gonna, you know, sharpen my skills, and this was the place where I was really excited to work every day. And that first week, I ended up working about 120 plus hours. My first day, I was there 24 hours straight, and then I went home for 6, slept, came back and did 36 hours straight, went home for 6, slept, came back and did 31, and that was basically my life for the first year. And then about 7 months into that internship, all unpaid, by the way, Fabulous started preparing to work on his next album, which was called From Nothing to Something. And I was kind of the guy in the studio that had built a good enough relationship with him, and he asked me to record the album with him. So that was my first, about 1 year out of Full Sail, I landed my first engineering gig with Fabulous. So I was very fortunate and worked really hard to get there. And that was kind of the thing that set up the rest of my career. And then since then, I worked with Beyonce for a number of years as her engineer, worked with the Chainsmokers and co-produced a lot of their stuff, and wrote some stuff with them, and mixed a lot of their records. And then in the last couple years, connected with a group named BTS. Some of you guys might know them, and have written and produced and mixed numerous records for them. And this year, well, I'm also working with BTS this year and worked on a few songs on their latest album. But I had the privilege of working with a new artist named Lil Nas X. So my friends Take a Day Trip, who produced a lot of their records, who I've known for a long, long time. I guess Nas had just put Old Town Road out. We all know Old Town Road, right? Big song this year. The biggest, you could say. And they were working on, I think that was his third song he had ever recorded. Like, it was one of the first songs he had ever recorded, and it just started blowing up. And now, you know, there's pressure, you got a manager, you got a label, you got a lawyer, now you got to get in and make more records. And so they were one of the first producers who he worked with, and they had an amazing chemistry. And so today I'm going to break down Panini, which was his second single off this first album, and just show how it was sort of mixed, and you'll be able to see a bit about the production of it. Does everybody know that song? Yes. Everybody knows it? Great. Cool. So, without further ado, I think what I'll probably do, since we all know the song, I could probably I'll play like half the song. So I'll play a little bit of it, and then I'll break down kind of what's going on. Cool? Sound good? All right, here we go.
Hey Panini, don't you be a meanie. Thought you wanted me to go, why you tryna keep me teeny? It's a dreamy, wished it on a genie. I got fans finally, ain't you wanting them to see me? I thought you want this for my life, for my life. Said you wanted to see me thrive. You lied, just say to me what you want from me. Just say to me what you want from me. Hey Panini, don't you be a meanie. Thought you wanted me to go, why you tryna keep me teeny now? Now they need me, number one, I'm screaming. No, yeah, you used to love me, so what happened, what's the meaning? I thought you want this for my life, for my life. Said you wanted to see me thrive, you lied. Now when it's all done, I get the upper hand. I need a big bitch, not another fan. But I still want you as a fan. I'ma need to sit down, don't mean to make demands, but I need you to say to me what you want from me. Just say to me
It's actually a shorter song than I realize right now. But so that's a song, we've all heard it before. So why don't I dig right into it, and this is usually the time where I say if you have questions about something I'm talking about, throw your hands up, and we'll get right into it. So, is there already a question? Yes. Let's hear it.
How you doing? My name is Mike Harris. I'm a recording art student. So just after like listening to it, the first question I had before like you got into everything was, how do you maintain consistency and like transparency from a verse to a chorus in vocals specifically, while being able to give that new flavor from that transition from a verse into a chorus?
That's a very good question. So basically, how do you, if I gather what you're saying correctly, how do you make a chorus jump or lift or feel like a distinct section while still making sure that it feels glued to the verse and connected? A lot of that is actually in vocal production. So, for example, the lead vocal, now in this case it's a little bit different. Every song's different, so I'll sort of get into it. But the first thing to make a chorus jump out is, a verse is going to be typically one lead vocal, right? A chorus, sometimes you'll have just a lead, but oftentimes you'll have harmonies or octaves, high octave, low octave, doubles, stacks. So you'll add extra layers to the vocal to lift it up and make it feel bigger. And sometimes you'll have the same EQ as your verse. Usually it's recorded on the same microphone, hopefully. And so there's a lot of consistency already in that. But what ultimately changes is maybe for the chorus you have a bigger reverb. So maybe a large hall on the chorus, but the verse is a room or a plate, something smaller. The EQ is going to be largely the same. How you process the vocal could largely be the same. But at the same time, every song is different. So in this case, we'll dig into it. What I'll do is I'll start, typically when I do these things, I like to start with my mix process. And usually, especially with hip hop, it starts with drums and bass. And that's the first thing I like to build, because hip hop is the driving thing behind, drums is the driving element behind hip hop. So especially if you're mixing a record like this, you want your drums to be slapping, you want them hitting right, and then you build everything around that. So I'll go through the process, but I will absolutely address how I'm processing the lead vocal, and then here's sort of the chorus vocal stack and backgrounds, and I'll show you how that all works. So let's just start with the 808 and the kick. Usually I'll just solo these things so you can hear. That hits. So what do I have on it? Let me take this off. You might not hear it that well in this room, but what am I doing? So this is a little plugin that is an envelope shaper. So I'm adding a little bit of attack to all frequencies, really. And then also adding a little bit of a tail. So it's changing the shape of the tail on that 808. And then I have a little bit of a bump in the mid-range frequencies. There was plenty of bass in that. Oftentimes on 808s, I will either add a distortion, or if there is some mid-range stuff in there, I will boost the mid-range a bit. And that's for the reason that if you're listening on little earbuds or laptop speakers, or, I mean, a lot of us don't have incredible sounding sound systems, right? So the idea is so that you can feel that 808 on speakers or headphones that won't necessarily translate the really low frequency stuff. So that's the reason why I do that. But in a nightclub, for example, this is probably not going to make a huge difference. But on your earbuds, it will. What else do I have on it? And I have a little R bass on it, although the intensity is really, really low. And it's at 60 hertz. So just adding some of those like 60 hertz. I think R bass does some subharmonic stuff to it. But again, very low, so not too much happening there. And then we have a kick which is programmed to hit every time the 808 hits. So let me hear that kick by itself. So really short, punchy. And the reason that Day Trip layers it, I layer my kicks and 808s like this as well, is you want that 808 gives like the size and the sub, but you still want that punch. You still want it to hit. Sometimes 808s can have be a bit soft on the top of them. So that's the reason why they're layered. This is actually an art in and of itself. What am I doing? This is a bit of an art in and of itself because you have to make sure you pair the right 808 with the right kick drum. If you have the wrong kick drum, maybe they're phasing. You might have to flip the phase to make sure they're hitting right. A lot of times when I'm layering kicks to 808s, I'll zoom in and I will nudge. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. I'll nudge the kick a little bit around by milliseconds, 1 or 2 forward, 1 or 2 back, just to see what is that perfect timing that makes them hit and work best together. So if I move this even a few milliseconds to the left, it's not going to hit the same way. And so that's something that I frequently do, and I think a lot of producers do. Some of you guys might do that as well. So kick and 808, those work well together. What else do we have here? Now we have some drums that are in the, maybe I'll jump back to that. So I'll stick with the verse section first, and then I'll jump to the drums that are happening in that chorus section. So what else do we have? We have a clap. Pretty straightforward, dry. What do I have going on here? A little bit of compression. A little bit of low mid EQ. What's that, about 500 hertz? But not too much there. That's a great sounding clap. So it's just a little more full. Can you guys hear that? I don't know if the room translates to that, but a little more full there in those low mids. What else? We have a snare that hits just periodically. Little bit of compression, nothing too crazy. So it hits a little bit harder. When you get files for a song and it's well produced, you don't need to do too much. And that's one of the mistakes that I see all the time is especially with younger engineers and producers, is they will add way too much trying to fix something. Usually the answer is find a better sound. And so I always try to share that information with people. Like, look for the best sounds. Spend time with your sound design. Make sure your kick is hitting the way you want. If you have to layer 4 or 5 kicks, that means that it's not really doing what you want it to do. And you're sort of like, it's like a Band-Aid solution. Let's see what else. We have this rim sound. So I'm doing an interesting delay there. Let me take it off. So you're just getting a nice little bounce to it. Once I play all the drums in context, you'll hear why that was used. And then we have a simple hi-hat, which I love using Saturn on it. I usually use this 4x4 hat designer, and what this does is it'll change the sound of some of the hi-hats, and so you get a more dynamic sounding hi-hat pattern. So see how that's very flat? And now it's kind of bounces a little bit, gives a little more dynamics. So I use that all the time on hi-hats. So let me play you these drums by themselves. Oh, here we go. So you get some nice bounce with that rhythm delay on that rim there. Okay, let's look at the drums in the chorus real quick. So Dot the Genius did these ones. What do we have? We have a kick. Not what you would expect out of a kick, right? That's because he's got a drum loop that is acting more like the low end, the punchiness of a kick. So let's listen to that. So let's see what we're doing on there. We have some compression. We have a bit of a bump in, the low frequencies, about 100, but then a roll off on the really, really low frequencies. Those tend to just sound, wobbly and not really tight. So often, even on basses, I will roll off the really, really low stuff that's going to make a speaker kind of wobble a little bit. And what else? And I'm pushing that roll off a little bit more here, but then also still boosting a little more low end. So this is actually kind of doing similar to what the other thing was doing. And I'll bypass everything, and you can hear what's happening. See how that just really hits a lot harder? And then I did one other thing. So when I was given files, I was given just this one track. What I did was I duplicated the track, and I have a different set of processing on this one, which I don't remember what I did, but I believe it's probably making it brighter. So let me listen. Exactly. Okay. So this orange or this yellow track here, it's the exact same loop, just processed differently. So let's see what we're doing. Same compression. It's literally just copied from the other thing. But the EQ is completely rolled off, so none of the low frequencies or even the mids. And then I have this wider plugin that's just spreading everything out, giving it a bit more of a stereo image. And so let's mute that and play the original loop, and then we'll add it back in and see what that does. All right? So I don't know if you guys can hear that. It's hard to hear in these wedges here, but it's adding some high-frequency spatial stuff to those drums. So that is the chorus drums. And let's see what else we have. So here we have, I think, a live bass. So that was played by Day Trip. And let's take everything off and see what's happening. So way crunchier, a little more aggressive on the top. What do we have going on here? We have a compressor, a little bit of analog stuff happening there. Filtered off some of the lowest frequencies. Basically everything below 60. The reason for that is we already have an 808. I don't need those low frequencies from this bass. I want more of the high frequency, mid-range frequency from this live bass. The 808s are handling the lowest stuff. So I filter out some of the lowest stuff. There's a tape saturator thing on it. And then also, when I was delivered the files of this bass, I don't know if you can see, but this is, the left and right channel are doing slightly different things. And what that means is you get a very stereo sounding bass. And a stereo bass can often just throw a mix off. And so what I'm doing with this S1 imager is actually narrowing the field so that it sits more in the middle with your drums and whatnot. So let's play it one more time, and I'll take everything off, and you can hear what's going on. You guys all hear that? Yeah? Great. All right, what else do we have? Let me try to move through this because I would love to get to more of the Q&A stuff. What is this? This is another bass sound. So super subby, that's just in that sort of bridge section. I'm rolling off a bit of the low end there, but then what I'm actually doing with this low air is adding a subharmonic octave that is giving that really low rumble. All right, what else? This is like a simple synth bass, I believe. So compressing it a bunch, taming it, stretching that tail out a bit. Yeah, pretty simple. All right, what are we doing on the main synth? So this was actually one of the first songs that I used. Some of you might have been at my previous lecture. One of the big things of news this year is I developed my first plugin. It's called The Sauce. And it's available now, and thank you. So this is one of the first things that I used The Sauce on, and it was actually, I use an early beta version of it. And so let's hear what I'm doing. This is the main synth. So that's without it. So obviously it's boosting the volume a little bit. That's just a byproduct of using the saturation. But what I'm doing is I'm using the compression here, squeezing it a bit, and this knob here, Spice, is there's two settings. Hot is an aggressive distortion. Mild is a more milder saturation sound. And so that just gave that main synth a little bit of crunch, nothing too much, just to give it some character. So, and I can talk more about the plugin later, but let me get through the mix and whatnot. But it's a great plugin. Check it out. It's called The Sauce, and you can get it at djswivel.com. And we're working on trying to get it into the school, so bear with us. That'll take some time. Okay. What else do we have? All right. In the chorus, we have... So one of the things you'll notice is I have... Everything is color-coded. This just helps with organization. Daytrip is actually really good at sending me stems that are organized. So if you look, all the drums, if it's a bass thing, it'll have a B in it. So this is Daytrip B 808. If it's a drum thing, it'll have a D in it. And then the more instrument things will say like synth or whatever. So they're very good at naming their stuff, which is always helpful for an engineer or a mixer. But then I'll go one step ahead of that and make sure that I'm color coding things. So drums, I'll have one color. The bass things I'll have usually as a brown. And then the synths and other main elements, if they are grouped together, like they're doing one thing, like these four blue ones are, they'll be colored one way, and this main synth is colored its own way. All right, so let's hear what's happening in this chorus. Let me listen to all four of these since they work together. Okay, so what's happening? Let's break it down. So I have Brower Motion on there, which is doing like a Doppler panning effect. I don't know if you guys have ever used that. It's really cool. And then there is a meta flanger on it, just adding a little bit of that more metallic flanger sound. Very subtle, though. So let's see what we have next. We have this piano. So in the chorus, this is different from the vocal, your question earlier, but you know, I've pushed this sound up just in the chorus. So there's some clip gain automation there, and these are just little tricks that you do to make that chorus jump out a little bit more. Sometimes just making it a little bit louder, and that will trick the listener to think something big just happened here. So this is just a simple piano. Bit of reverb on it, nothing too crazy. And we have this. So I'm filtering out a lot of that low end. There was some low end rumble in there and spreading it out, making it nice and wide, getting it out of the middle. Because the middle, we have our drums. It's a drum-heavy track, right? So we have our drums, our lead vocals in the middle. We got to make sure those synths and other elements kind of fill the sides. And what is the last instrument here? Some subtle stuff happening there. A bit of like mid-frequency boost and a bit of stereo imaging as well. Okay, so getting back to your first question, the vocals. All right, let's see what's happening here. So let me make this larger. What I typically do with vocals is first I will get all the effects right, so without any reverb or delay or anything. So have a bit of auto-tune on it. I have a bit of de-essing in the upper frequencies. We have some low-end roll-off, some compression, a bit boosting a little bit of the high frequencies around 8K. And what else? About 800 hertz, we're boosting that a little bit, and we're boosting actually some of the low-mid stuff there as well. Then I have another compressor, so I often will compress twice on a vocal, but not too aggressive, so it'll be subtle. I'd rather do 2 subtle layers of compression than 1 aggressive compressor. And then this vitalizer does some high frequency, shiny stuff. And there's a bit of compression in this as well, but not too much. And then finally, this Pro Q3, which anytime I see this, what this usually tells me is when I sent the mix, I probably did not have this Pro Q3 on there. And I probably got feedback from the client saying, hey, we wish there was a little bit more mid-range in the vocal. And so rather than going back to this, because clients will change their mind all the time, like go back to the other one, it's just easier for me to add another EQ at the end and do the mid-range boost. And if they say, oh, do a little bit more, I can go straight to it, and I know how much I had before. And if they say, it's too much, or actually go back to the other version, I can just turn it off and bypass it. So that's really just a matter of convenience. So that's the vocal. And to address your initial question, how are we treating the chorus vocals differently? And I'll get into the effects and whatnot. But so all the chorus vocals, let's solo them and see what they're doing.
Say to me what you want from me.
So there's a bunch of stuff happening there. So we have this main low vocal.
What you want from me.
That's the lead. We're doing some weird EQ stuff. There were some interesting frequencies in there that needed to be cut out and some that needed to be boosted.
What you want from me, just say.
But that's like doing that early, and then all of it runs through a bus. And the bus is doing similar to what I did on the lead vocal. So this is kind of the thing that's gluing the two together. Same type of effects. I have a bit of a high frequency stuff taken out at the top. So some of the EQ is a little bit different, but largely it's the same sort of vocal processing. It's largely the same plugins and whatnot. Obviously, some of the EQs are a little bit different. Let me hear what is happening on these other backgrounds. I think these are just 4.
What you want from me, just say to me what you want from me.
So there's just a unison, hard pan left and right, 2 tracks obviously, and then a higher octave that's hard pan left and right. And that's kind of really the whole song. Oh, there's one thing that we missed, which was the whistle. So, fun fact, I've tried to whistle my entire life. I still have no idea how to whistle. And I kid you not, every year I will take a day and practice for 2 hours and try to make. I don't know. Physically, I'm unable to whistle. So, what's that? Oh, you can't? Yeah, I don't know. It's so annoying. So, anyways, so that's the song. I guess let me just quickly show my effects. So normally, these are some delay throws that the producers gave me that I just wanted to maintain, so I left those printed down there. And then I have my sort of chain of effects that I commonly use. So I have 4 different reverbs. This is a standard template that I will load on every mix, and then I will adjust the effects as needed. But I usually have a hall, a plate. This is like a weird high-frequency, long-tail reverb that is useful sometimes. A room. And then I have a bunch of like delay tracks where I get to do some interesting stuff. So this is just a quarter note delay that has a doubler on it. I do that a lot. So if I have a lead vocal and I want to put a delay on it, I don't want that delay bouncing back on top of the lead vocal. So I'll put a doubler on it. So when it bounces back, it goes in and then it comes out stereo. And so it just separates itself from the lead vocal. It's just sometimes a useful trick. And I have a flanger on the delay, so you get a little bit of unique effect there. And then I have the delay is being sent to a reverb so that delay doesn't feel too dry. It feels more like it's in a natural space. So I know we're a bit short on time. We got about 20 minutes, but I love to ask you guys if you have any questions. And
we have some online questions. Let me see how that's. We have a few online questions coming in.
Right.
Particularly about vocals, since you were just talking about that. Eli Morris is a recording arts student, and he's an artist and producer. He's asking, when does using pitch correction or auto-tune, where does it belong in your vocal chain?
I usually do that first. And I don't know if I have a good... I think for me, the way that I logically do it is I want to fix the problems first, and then I want to start adding and affecting. So pitch is usually the first thing you want to address, and so I typically have my pitch correction first, if it's needed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How you doing? Stephen Lane, recording arts, graduating in 2 months.
How are you?
Good, good. Question about your EQ choice using the SSL.
Yeah.
Now, do you do that? I see it's on a lot of the tracks because you want to keep the same feel, or that's your go-to?
No, you know what it is when I started in 2006 at that studio with Duro, he used the SSL. And so I learned his process, and that has largely stuck with me. With that being said, I use a lot of different EQs, but the SSL has always been a go-to. I love the Steven Slate stuff, and I love, the Fab Filter stuff too. So those are kind of my three go-tos, I would say. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing? Matt Reggio, recording arts. I was just wondering, seeing as I'm good, how are you?
Very good.
Seeing as this is a song that has a lot of layered basses on it, what's the biggest challenge when you're trying to get those to mesh?
Amazing question. Bass is one of the hardest things to make work together, and we sort of addressed some of that. You have to make sure you carve out. There's no need to have a low sub keyboard bass and an 808. And I get that all the time. And really, as a mixer, you have to start making decisions. So oftentimes I'll mute one, or I will... clearly, the 808 is usually used as the really low stuff. So if I have a sub bass with an 808, I'll do a couple things. I will add some saturation to create some mid-range frequency in just the played keyboard sub bass, and then I'll filter out some of the low end. So you still get that bass feel, but it's not occupying what the 808 might be doing. Another thing that you can do is send the 808 to a bus, and then put a compressor on that the keyboard bass, and every time that 808 hits, you would just sidechain to that, and so your compressor will hit every time the 808 hits, and so it'll create space for it. So you have this bass running, and then when an 808 comes in, it kind of does this thing, right? And often it's a combination of all of these things. It's not usually one thing. So as you can see, we have that 808 that's really low and occupying those frequencies. I did not need any of those low frequencies in the live bass. They're there, but it's not necessary. It's not helping the record. It's actually just getting in the way. And so you just get rid of it. And you have to make those decisions. It's kind of tough. But once you understand the concept of it, you need one thing that's really handling the low end at any given time. Now, in the case of this bridge, well, the 808 is not playing in the bridge. And so this is also occupying a lot of those low frequencies, so that's okay. But if this was playing with the 808, I would have to make a decision on what to do with that bridge pad bass. So, does that answer your question? Great.
I've got another online question for you over here.
Hey.
Jeffrey Chang is an independent artist joining us online, and he's curious, how often are you using live instruments in your mix versus virtual instruments?
Well, typically when I get a mix, sometimes I'll add instruments to a mix if it's a producer who I'm familiar with and they give me that freedom. But I'm also a songwriter and producer myself. I love using live instruments when I can. But it's like tastefully done. So obviously, if you have a guitar plugin, it never sounds good as a great guitar player with a great guitar, ever. And so usually guitars, I'm going to use a live guitar player. If I want a live bass, this is a live bass. This is not a keyboard. So yeah, if you have a bass, play it. Because that's going to add its own characteristic. But in the case of synths and things like that, obviously you're going to use some soft synths. You might use hardware keyboards, which I guess is also a live instrument. And so yeah, it's sort of like 50-50. It really just depends on what it is and what sound you're going for. Yeah.
Hey. Michael, I actually graduated last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Round of applause. I like that.
I'm looking at your session here, and I noticed your session setup is relatively simple, not a whole lot of grouping or subgroups. Are there technical reasons for that, or is that more of just your personal workflow?
Just my personal approach. I know a lot of engineers who like to submix into groups, and there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, it's how you like to approach the record. My mixes tend to be very clean. I like every sound to be audible, and I don't know. I've never felt the need to have to submix stuff. What I will do is if I have programmed drums and then I have a stack of live drums that are layered with it, those are usually tough to make work together. So I'll submix the drums out so that they're in two different buses, and maybe I'll have to do some parallel compression. So there's a lot of different techniques you can use to make them work together. So I will do things like that. But in this case, this is a fairly simple song, right? I mean, there's not a ton of tracks going on. And in my opinion, the songs that really translate the best are the simple ones, right? There's less getting in the way of the great elements in the mix. So my personal preference, really. Yeah.
Hi, how's it going?
How's it going?
Torres, Recording Arts. My question was on the vocal. I noticed it has specific sparkle or brightness to it.
Yeah.
And is it like a style of the entire album? Is it just for spacing? It doesn't have to have it, for the space of the mix, or is it any specific style that you go to?
So I work in a lot of pop music, EDM. And to me, those genres are characterized by really low lows and really bright highs, especially EDM, but pop too, though. And yeah, I mean, for me, every song is different. Not every song is going to need the bright vocal, but for this, you have a lot of low-end drum stuff, and so you need to balance it out. If I had a really dark vocal, it would feel very like 90s hip-hop kind of. And so you have to balance it out. At the end of the day, it's still a pop song. It's like hip-hop, but it's still a pop record. And so, you need to make sure that translates to radio properly. And that's just one of those instinctual things that I will do. But it's entirely based on the song. It's not like a universal rule. And this song needed it because there was so much low end happening in the drums. So you need a brighter vocal to balance that. And that same with the synths and other brighter elements, the whistle and stuff like that. Yeah.
Another online question over here.
Great.
JL is a recording arts student, and he's wondering, did you also get to mix DaBaby's vocals on the remix? And if so, what are some differences in how you compress each of their voices?
So actually, I did not mix DaBaby's vocals. I'm not sure how they went about that one. I also mixed Rodeo, and I did mix Big Nas's. Did anybody watch the Grammys? You saw old Nas came out with. I don't even know what to call old Nas now because some of y'all might not even know who that is. But one of my favorite artists growing up. And so I did get to mix Nas's vocals. So I'll sort of rephrase the question regarding rodeo.
They want to hear about rodeo too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of those things that they wanted to do a remix specifically to perform at the Grammys. And my approach to mixing Big Nas's vocal versus Lil Nas's vocal is not really different at all. I need Big Nas to glue. We already had the original version of Rodeo, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. I needed to make sure that Nas's vocal fit in, and you want to make sure that it feels cohesive. So actually going back to the earlier question about making sure choruses and verses feel cohesive but also feel different, naturally Big Nas is going to have a different voice, so there's going to be differences, but then you still want to maintain that cohesiveness. And so you got to make sure that when you sort of holistically listen to the EQ curves and how it and the dynamics of the vocal, you want to make sure that they all kind of work together. Yeah.
Hi, Seth Morrison, all right?
How's it going? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good. I had a question about the whistle. Was the whistle tuned with Melodyne by Day Trip and then sent to you, or was that just a really good performance?
Okay, so I don't have an answer to that, but I will say Denzel, in one of the two members of Take a Day Trip, has oddly like a very good whistle sound, and also I'm told like Lil Nas X has an amazing whistle too. I think this might actually be Nas's whistle, and I don't know if they melodyned it, but I can tell you I have worked with artists who have like incredible whistles that I'm super envious of, and not all of them need Melodyne. But it's very possible that it was used. Either way, it came to me in a stem, so I didn't have to worry about that. That was part of the production process.
Do you have any questions?
Let's hear it. It's a pretty good one. It's pretty good. Yeah, I wish I had an answer for you, but yeah, I received a stem, so yeah.
Hi, I'm AJ, audio production. Plan on being an EDM artist myself.
Awesome.
You were saying how there's the really high highs and the really low lows. I was like, yeah. And like I had a question about like that kind of regarded the lows.
Okay.
Like whenever I'm trying to make a track, like I find that it's hard to kind of hear the different lows. Like they kind of mush together, like
they do.
sound like one thing. Like,
yep.
Is there a way to prevent that, like to be able to hear them separately more clearly?
Well, sort of like this gentleman's question earlier, you have to make choices when you're dealing with low-end frequency stuff. So there's always a number of low-end things in a mix. You have a kick drum, you might have a few kick drums, you might have an 808, you might have a bass, you might have a synth bass, a live bass, you have all these different things. You have to make decisions. You can't have them all. So usually with EDM music, it's usually like two basses. There's obviously your kick drum that drives the song, and then there's often like a sidechain bass that would work with the kick drum. So every time that kick drum hits, the sidechain bass cuts out, and that's how you get that pumping sound. And you've all used those plugins like like a one knob pumper or the Kickstart, the Nicky Romero one, or LFO tool. That's what these things are there for, is to create those dynamics in EDM music. And it's not just to create the sound of EDM, but it's also because you have multiple low-end things, and you want to make sure that when that kick is hitting, you have something that's carved out. And that's just part of the nature of the genre, but that, in principle, that applies to all genres of music. If you have multiple low-end frequency things, you have to start making some decisions over what is the most important one. What do I want to drive this song forward from a bass perspective? All right, cool. How do I fit this secondary bass to work with that, but not necessarily be the driving low-end feature? So you have to make some decisions over when you're putting records together, what is most important and what is not. Yeah. Because the bass frequencies really are hard to hear. Once you want, and And when they are playing together, if they're not playing in unison, all of a sudden your speakers sound crazy, right? So that's a problem. That's one of the hardest things in a mix and something that we deal with a lot. So, any other?
Over here online, Aaron, who's watching us on YouTube, is wondering, how do you achieve that pristine high end on vocals? He would love to hear specifics, EQ or parallel comp. How is the high end achieved?
Yeah, I sort of touched on that earlier. Sometimes it's parallel compression. Sometimes it's using some of those plugins that are little brighteners, saturators, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's just simple. It's just simple EQ. If it's not bright enough, turn it up. What the problem is a lot of people will just go straight to the high frequencies and turn it up. But every vocal is different, and you need to make sure you are enhancing the complementary frequencies and not enhancing the harsh, irritating ones. And that's really the biggest mistake. It's really simple to go to an EQ and just turn up the high. But every voice is different, and that's going to affect every voice differently. So you have to know, you have to really use your ear and know which frequencies are good frequencies that I want to boost and which ones I need to make sure that I'm taming. And so a lot of times with vocals, I'm trying to think, I didn't do it on this song, but one of the most frequent things I'll do is I'll use a de-esser as an EQ. And I'll use it as a de-esser is just a frequency-specific compressor, right? So a lot of times with female vocals especially, somewhere around here, like the 2500 hertz, somewhere between 2 and 3.5K. Often with female vocalists, there is a very irritating frequency there that when you start compressing and boosting can really get enhanced. And it's not a fun frequency and it hurts your ears. And we've all heard it before. So often I will use, and sometimes when you have a dynamic vocal where maybe you go up to a high note, it really gets pronounced. In that case, I will use a de-esser to just de-ess when those frequencies really pop out loud. And that tends to smooth out your vocal a bit, and so you can still get the brightness, but get rid of the harshness, if you will. Hopefully that answers it. Yeah. Sure.
Hey, my name is Jake Umdorf, music production, month 19.
How are you?
Doing good. So I have a question about just timing. I know you're a lot more efficient than us, more experienced, but for us mix engineers that are trying to get better, how long did it take you to make this record?
I think this one was probably pretty quick because there's not a ton of stuff going on. Also, I work very frequently with Day Trip, and so we understand each other. There's like this silent communication where I know exactly what they're looking for out of a mix, and so I can get to an end result pretty quickly with them. This mix, I would imagine, took somewhere between 2 and 3 hours for the initial mix, and then of course there's always some back and forth. So it's never actually 2 hours. It's usually a couple days. But there's always a layer of back and forth. But I've had other mixes that were 12-hour mixes or 15-hour mixes because there's a lot to work through and get to work together. They're also very talented producers, and everything in this production works really well together. That's not always the case. Sometimes you get songs that are just a mess, and you really have to make some difficult decisions over how you're going to address it. Those ones usually take longer. So, is that all we have time for? Wrap it up. Well, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you guys. And if you haven't had a chance to try out the sauce, there's a free trial online. Go check it out on djswivel.com, and I think you guys will like it. So, thank you. Thank you.